What if sales prospecting could be more predictable? What if the very thing that we treat most tactically in sales, instead, we treated most strategically? Back in May of 2011, I had the experience of a lifetime. I gathered together with a group of entrepreneurs in San Diego, California, and we got on a van and we headed out to the Marine Corps Air Station Miramar. There we got fitted with helmets, goggles, and vests. We went through safety training, and we boarded a C-2 Greyhound, also known as a cod, and we headed out to sea. About 100 miles off the coast, we approached the John C. Stennis aircraft carrier, and we began to pitch with the ship. We began to accelerate and decelerate, and eventually we did a full arrested landing on the deck of that ship. And I have to admit, I felt a little bit like Tom Cruise in Top Gun. I thought about changing my name to Maverick. And as amazing as it was to do that arrested landing, it was just as amazing to stay around on the ship and observe full flight operations that day and that night. It's no small task what those pilots are asked to do. They have a runway of about 500 feet, and they have to use the plane's tail hook to catch an arresting wire. It's made of woven steel. It's designed to stop a 54,000-pound aircraft that's traveling at 150 miles per hour in only 2 seconds. That night, as we got prepared to go to sleep, we had to put earplugs in our ears because only a few decks above us on the ship, they were still going through full flight operations until 2 and 3 a.m. So take that death-defying act and make it even more terrifying by doing it in the middle of the night in pitch black. In addition to gaining a whole new appreciation for our U.S. military through this experience, it also helped me understand the process for breaking down complex tasks and how that can be implemented in sales. I've had the opportunity over the years to observe the growth strategies of many different businesses, from very large multinational firms to very young startups that are 3 people and an idea. And it seems like they have the same approach to trying to scale sales, that the first investment they need to make is in an enterprise sales resource. And then the innovator of that company is going to take all that knowledge and work to transition it completely and wholly so that person can manage the whole sales process on their own successfully, versus looking at the most tactical elements of the sales process and starting to maximize those first. Prospecting for many companies is the first step of the process, and yet it's treated as an afterthought. A lot of companies approach it as, well, let's just hire some college grads. We'll give them a list or something, or buy a list, or maybe tell them they can build it, and we'll train them a little bit, and then throw them on the phones. Let's get some volume out of them. Let's get some calls. And then they're shocked when everyone has a different process, if they have a process at all, and they have no way to measure its success. Prospecting can be one of the most valuable parts of the sales process. When I look back at that experience on the aircraft carrier, I noticed that those pilots don't start their careers by landing on aircraft carriers in the middle of the night, and they don't do it alone. There are 6,000 seamen on the deck of that ship that are helping manage safe flight operations. And it was never more clear to me than when we were observing operations on one of the decks below, and that's where they store a lot of the aircraft, and every hour they would muster together and they would stand shoulder to shoulder and they would walk the deck. And they would look for the tiniest speck of debris that could possibly get sucked into an engine and be a huge safety hazard for everyone on that ship. Now imagine if they approached their flight operations the same way most companies approach those tactical elements of sales, with the wild abandon, careless, afterthought mindset. How many lives would be at risk? 6,000 lives, if not more. Those prospecting teams can be some of the most early indicators of market readiness. After all, they're on the front lines. They're having more live dialogues with the market than any other area of the business. And yet what gets discussed in the boardroom are the handful of deals that recently closed versus the 10,000 calls that it took to get there. I was working with a company that felt very strongly that they sold into the financial services space very well. That's where they'd had a lot of their sales wins. They wanted 90% of the effort for the calling campaign to go there. But along the way, the other 10%, we targeted some other industries. And what we found was that there were 3 industries, leisure, hospitality, and manufacturing, that had 3 times higher response than financial services. Now, did they shift their budgets overnight to change the 90-10 rule? No. But did they start to shift a small portion of their budget, 5%, to further vet that idea? Absolutely. Because they didn't want to miss a window of market readiness just because their 12-month sales cycle was yielding deals in financial services. If prospecting is run well and thought about strategically, there should be answers to 5 questions that anyone in the organization could answer. The first is data strategy. There should be a clear, well-thought-out process around the list, the source and the quality of that list, and how it's being grouped together by industry, by lead source, by title path. There should also be a very clear answer to messaging. How are we messaging this? Are we taking the same message to those different groups? Are we going to test different messaging strategies to the different audiences? The third is cadence. How many calls should we make to drive results? Should we assume that it takes 10 calls to reach every single person and we should treat every lead or every prospect the exact same way? Probably not. So why don't we have an intentional approach that we can actually measure to know if we need to make 3 calls before we give up or 15? Maybe that will help me with how I scale my team. The fourth is technology. What if that same mindset that we took towards building out the sales technology and CRM to be able to manage those 5 deals we just closed, to manage the 10,000 calls that it took to drive the 5 deals? And the fifth would be measurement. We can't just measure based on sheer volume, how many calls are being made, and let's just bang the market with phone calls. And we can't measure just based on anecdotal scenarios, listening to one call recording and allowing that to define the strategy of how we change our process. It has to be a well-thought-out approach. So I know that when I target financial services with one message and my no interest rate shoots up, I have tangible information that I can use to adjust to the market. Prospecting should be a very clear and structured process. It should be well thought out. It should be intentional, and it should be well trained. What if the very part of sales that's treated tactically was treated strategically? Would that lead to more predictable sales growth? Thank you very much.